those who have forgotten the past are condemned to repeat it. And I'm here to remind you of the past. Not Christmas past, just the past, right? That was Dickens. And like most people of my generation and every generation before me, minorities, women, gays, lesbians, transgender people, I grew up in a world in which we were harassed on the street, and in which there was nothing we could do about it, and also in which there were no words to discuss this, because the word harassment was invented in 1983. And so we had no words even to think about what it was that was happening to us as women. So most of us did blame ourselves. We tried to wear more clothes. Some of my friends tried to wear more weight. They put more hair, over their heads, just big hats, anything to hide. But the only place really to hide was in your house. And that was really what the patriarchy wanted, was for women to be out of the public. That is the goal of street harassment. The other problem that we faced as activists of the 60s and 70s was that the men on the left in the civil rights movement, the peace movement, Students for a Democratic Society, these other leftist groups, they were not supportive of women who felt harassed. They felt that this was a minor issue, that their issues were all major issues, and that we just had this problem we should get over and sleep with them, so that they could have a revolution that we would then support. That was our job, was to support their revolution. And we were supposed to feed them, sleep with them, and help them get on with changing the world, and to understand that their suffering was really important, that they were the people who might die in Vietnam, and they might get drafted, and our suffering, that if we got raped or if we got murdered, that was relatively minor and individual. They did not care at all about that. And they felt that the way that we should react to street harassment and even to rape was what was, passive resistance. That people should not speak back, that people should never fight back, and that people should not resist any of these terrible behaviors. We found out when we had the women's movement, and the Red Stockings, which I was an early member of, developed something called consciousness raising, and we sat around in groups. We discovered in sharing our bitterness that all of us had been treated in this way on the streets. It wasn't just the problem of one woman, it was the problem of every woman. But we didn't know what it was that we could do about it, because we had been told that we should do nothing about it because all these other problems were larger, and everyone wanted to weigh, everyone's oppression and put ours at the bottom. So we just sat there and we talked about our oppression, and we realized that this was common. We also realized that men in this country like to harass in groups, and that primarily it is done for the sake of other men, for men to demonstrate their masculinity. It's most often done during the day because the men want to feel safe. They don't want to be accused of anything, so they do it in front of their friends, and they strut, and they demonstrate that they're heterosexual and that they're real men, and they put on this show, and women are just supposed to get on with it. And then I came across the most egregious example of what was going on. One day in the New York Times, I read the story of a woman named Francine Godfrey. who was a secretary at a Wall Street brokerage house, and she was described by the New York Times as being, quote, well endowed, unquote. And every day when she emerged from the Wall Street station in Lower Manhattan, men in pinstripe suits waited for her to come out of the subway. They called her names, they tried to grope her, and they harassed her all the way to her workplace. When she emerged for lunch, as many as 5,000 men in pinstripe suits and their hats, and I assume that many of you have seen Mad Men and know the kind of guys I'm talking about, and their assistants, 5,000 men would wait for her to emerge from her office to see what she was wearing. She wondered why they didn't have something better to do. I organized what I called facetiously the first national ogle-in. Now, one of the things that emerged out of the 1960s and was invented by the yippies, those were people like Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, were these street actions that involved theater and a bit of humor. And I decided to organize this ogle-in and to turn the tables on the men on Wall Street. We had learned through previous political actions, for example, picketing the Miss America pageant, seizing the Ladies' Home Journal, which 100 women did in February of 1970, that the best thing to do was to call in the press to protect you from the police, because there was a tactical police squad in New York that would come right out and smash your head. So I called ABC TV and other TV stations and the media, and I got about a dozen feminist friends, and we got up really early and we went down to that Wall Street station, and when the men emerged from the train station, the subway station, we called them names. We made whistling noises. We sucked our mouths at them. We made the gestures that they made. This was 1970. The men's jaws fell and they ran. They started down the street. They didn't know what to do. And the TV cameras followed after them as they galloped off, you know. And it was really quite amazing to see them all run. And then we got a call from some radio stations to talk about this. But when some of my friends and I got to these radio stations, and all of these radio and TV shows were live back then, on the wall of every radio station in the country, there was a list of 7 words that could not be said on the air. And these were famously made fun of by Lenny Bruce in a skit in which he used all of the 7 words. And so when the host asked us what was happening to us, we looked at the words and thought, well, those are the words that describe exactly what's happening to us. But we couldn't use the words, and we tried to explain around what had happened, and he just really didn't seem to be getting it because he was a guy. And he was probably doing it too. So he just couldn't get it. But the women who were listening to these shows, they understood. They understood what we had done. And they understood what was happening to us. And after the shows, I got hundreds of letters from women from all over the country. And, you know, a few complained. Most of them said, yes, this has happened to me too, because we certainly didn't have an internet back then, and they enjoyed the fact that the tables had been turned, if only for a moment. You know, it was just a moment in history, although it still lives on the internet. You can still find this ogle-in on YouTube. It's still up there, or it's recently been put up by someone. The lesson of this action, you know, 44 years ago, it's over 44 years ago, is that it doesn't take this room full of people to make a major action. It takes a few women and men to stand up against sexism, racism, and homophobia. You don't have to be the largest group in the world to make a difference. The problem is if you don't stand up. that this has been going on since the beginning of time, probably, since women were first allowed out of their homes. You know, in ancient Greece, women were allowed out, I think it was on 6 or 7 public holidays. Most people don't realize that, and the rest of the time they were not. So since women got out of the house, there is a force that tries to push us back into an enclosed space. Even Jane Austen, there was another writer said Jane Austen's novels, although we love her dearly, her characters, they went into the garden and they never got much further. But why? Because it wasn't safe for them. But if we don't want this to go on, what happened to me 50 years ago, and what's happening to you today, then it has to come to a stop. And this is what your charge is. This is what your mission is. And you cannot stop because you want to be free, you want your children to be free, and you want your grandchildren to be free. And unless you stand up now and put a final stop to this kind of behavior, change will not happen. So if it's up to you and you can do it, there are groups now like HOLLA that can help you organize. There's the internet that can help you organize. There's media on the net that can help you organize. So go out and do it. There's no excuse anymore not to do this and not to make it stop now. Thank you very much.